The challenge of every entrepreneur is how do I accomplish more with less? In particular, with less time. Just like with money, the secret to getting more out of your time is leverage. And that means getting others to do the work. But if 7 years in the Marine Corps and 20 years in corporate has taught me anything, it's that delegation is one of the hardest and yet most important skills you can develop. Let's face it, who's going to do something better than you? Who can you count on to care more about a project than you do? Well, guess what? This is fundamental to accomplishing more with less and freeing your time to focus on higher value activities. So hang on to your suspenders because today Dave and I are going to go deep on delegation. Hello, all you wonderful land mogul entrepreneurs. I'm Howard Zonder with my partner David Van Steenkes, and this is the Land.MBA Podcast. So happy you could join us today. Before we get started, we hope you'll just take a moment and rate, review, leave a comment on our podcast or on YouTube. It really helps us out, and we are just so eager to bring more content to you to help you succeed as land investors. So anything you can do to help, we would greatly appreciate it. How are you today, Dave?
I am excellent. Excellent.
All right. To fish or not to fish? That is the question on your shirt.
What a stupid question.
What a stupid question. I will present my shirt a little bit later in the podcast. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about something that I think every land investor in all phases, I think every business person, every entrepreneur struggles with from time to time, but when they get it right, they're highly rewarded by it, by freeing up their time and actually helping their company to scale faster and be more effective and more profitable. And that is the art of delegation.
Delegation.
So what do you think about delegation, Howie?
Delegation. Delegation is probably the most important thing any aspiring successful person needs to learn. It's one of the hardest things to do. So the earlier you can start, the more you put yourself out there, the better off you're going to be. But as a new entrepreneur or even as an existing entrepreneur, we have to do everything, especially in this business. These are small businesses, either solopreneurships or small partnerships. And so we have to do everything from strategy to finance to marketing to operations. Frankly, in a lot of ways, you could say there's more to do than needs to be done. And the thing that I think holds most people back in this business is they're so busy turning that crank that they can't actually do the important stuff, which is the strategy work, the partnerships, the financing, the things like that. So it's really about how can you get 3 hours of work out, 3 man hours, I should say, out of every hour you work. And I don't mean that to be sexist. It could be 3 woman hours just as well. So
we're non-binary hours.
But the phrase I always like to use, and I've told this to the people that worked for me for my entire career. Remember this and remember it well. It's not about what you do. It's about what you get done. That's all that matters. That's all that anybody cares about. What have you gotten done? I don't care how hard you try. I don't care how many hours you put in. I care about what you have got done. And if you can find ways to create leverage to get other people to help you so that you can get more done in per unit time, fantastic. That's just a bonus.
Yeah, I agree.
Would you like to receive a short, easily digestible email each Friday containing the 5 coolest articles, videos, apps, and hacks that we found of interest specifically to land investors? If so, go to land.mba/newsletter to sign up, and each Friday we'll send you for free the coolest email in land investing. That's land.mba/newsletter.
Delegation is probably the most powerful tool we have in our toolbox. But we got to do it effectively, which means we got to hire well. So that's a skill in and of itself too. I see, a lot of people come into this business where they may have been, let's say, individual contributors, and very successful even in their career, but they didn't have to hire and manage. So that is a skill set. You'll hear me talk a lot about the who, not the how, but there's a certain amount of how we got to learn, because if we want to find the who's, we got to develop a skill of how to find, hire, manage those who's. So tell me a little bit about your, tell us a little bit about your Marine Corps experience in this.
Well, so the great thing about being in the Marine Corps, especially as a young person, is you get a lot of responsibility fast. And so you get to tackle these issues fast. And it's interesting when you tackle an issue like delegation when you're 22, 23 years old, because that's probably the time as a man that you are most ego driven. And it was hard. It's really, really hard to do, but really important. So what are all the things that might hold us back from being good delegators? And I'll say this: we're having this conversation, and it may seem a bit theoretical, but when you're actually out there and you have a deliverable to your boss, who may be wearing, in my case, silver oak leaves or a silver eagle on his shoulder, and is a pretty intimidating guy, you want to deliver, and you want to deliver well. Because one, because you want to rise in your career, and two, because you don't want to get your ass kicked. So the challenge with delegating is, who's going to do it better than I am? Nobody. Who's going to care more than me? Nobody. There are people out there, especially now, this might be a little bit more of in a larger organizational setting, but they might feel threatened at the possibility of a subordinate who can actually do the project better than they can. And there are some times when that happens. Oh, now they've done it better. Well, what do you need me for? I'm superfluous. You don't need me anymore. That's a problem. How do you find?
Not to interrupt you, but I just want to interject there. There's a book I read years ago. It's called How to Work for an Idiot, and it's.
I think my employees all read that.
That's why they were so effective. I mean, the premise of it is that manager that is a control freak and concerned about preserving their job and not wanting anybody to show them up, versus the abundance mentality is that, man, this guy just did a fantastic job, does it better than me, takes that off my plate. Now I'm able to grow. So
exactly.
And that's the premise of the book. But go ahead.
Right. And that's a very good point. And if you're going to delegate, though, you have to have somebody to delegate it to. So you got to make sure that you have or are able to find the right people to do the work. How do you assign the work, and how do you supervise them to make sure that they're on track, they do the right job, they get it done on time, and whether you're doing this to deliver to a boss, or whether you are the boss and you need that project in order to close the deal or whatever it is. Most things are time bound in some way. And so the project has to not only be done, but it has to be done fully and perfectly and correctly on time. And that might mean some project planning, because maybe they do the job and then you need some period of time to review it and to make any adjustments that you need to make until it's in its final form. So how do you do all that? How do you create the right incentives for people so that they do their best work and they do deliver great work on time? We said the challenge up above, one of the challenges is, how do you get them to care as much as you do? Well, there are ways to do that. So how do you get them to care as much as you do? These are all the challenges that I certainly faced as a young buck in the Marine Corps, and it was hard. I mean, it was It was so hard.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. And it's interesting. That is a how to get them to care as much as you. I think you have correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have a little bit different dynamic there in the military, in that it's not, it's project or mission focused, where everybody should be on the same page with different roles. But then you have, let's say, as a business owner, where we're sinking or swimming, depending on how well our business performs. We're making all the profit or we're taking all the loss. And you have someone who, you're just paying a wage. Maybe there's a bonus in there. I think having understanding perspective is key. You can get employees, contractors, whatnot, motivated, but I don't know that you can ever get them to care as much as you do. It's your baby. You're the owner. You can get them to care a lot, but I think you have to keep that perspective that, look, I'm working Saturdays, I'm working nights, but I've got to manage my expectations of the people who are working for me. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have been in jobs. I certainly had a job once where I was in a director role, and it was a small startup company. And my boss was a former college buddy of mine and a driven, super smart guy. I mean, he ended up selling this company for a lot of money. I helped him get there, but this was definitely a case where working for him was challenging because he didn't necessarily control that perspective at times. He expected the same kind of a commitment that he had. And I think that's unrealistic, actually, in a business owner. But, successful delegation, you alluded to it above, we've got to understand our processes and our systems and what needs to get done. So who do we delegate it to? If we're hiring for that person, we've got to understand how to evaluate their skills. Do they have the right skills for the position? Sometimes when we do a lot of work with VAs, and so sometimes we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. That VA may be really good at certain tasks, but he or she is not going to be the best at maybe maybe they're really good at doing back office stuff, due diligence and things like that. But, they're not going to be the one to write ad copy and place our property ads, and vice versa. So we got to also, make sure that we're properly and clearly defining what the definition of a successful result is. And then work backwards from there, and then provide clear instructions, provide them the right tools. And if it's something that's repeating, we've got to, it goes a long way to have good SOPs. One of the things that I do to ensure that a subordinate understands my instructions, especially if it's a something new, is that I will either give them verbal or written instructions, and then I will ask them to write me back in an email or a message, whatever. I want them to write back to me their understanding of what I just delegated to them. Mm-hmm. And that one thing, and I think I learned it in a white paper that I read about managing VAs a few years ago. But once I implemented that, it made a huge difference. It drives the buy-in of the subordinate, and then B, and most important really, is you figure out the misunderstandings before the project gets started. So if they're 10% off on their understanding, you'll find it in their summary. So that's been a great tool. Versus at the end, they finish the project and it's 10% off or 20% off.
I think that's so important. And Let me provide an example of what happens when you don't do that.
Mm.
So I was a young buck first lieutenant at Cherry Point, North Carolina. And I was the S4, which is the logistics officer. And my colonel said, "Hey, I want somebody to get the stencils and the yellow paint and write entrance at the beginning of the driveway on this side." So I said, "Yes, sir." And so grab the stencils, go over to Corporal Bonatz. "Corporal Bonatz, here are the stencils. Here's the paint. I want you to paint the word entrance at the beginning of the driveway. I'm going to lunch." And I went off to lunch. And I came back, and there was a word at the beginning of the driveway. And it said ENTRAC. I know the colonel's about to see it. And I go to "Corporal Bonatz, what the hell's the matter with you? Don't you know how to spell entrance?" And he goes, "Sir, it's not my fault." I said, "What do you mean it's not your fault?" He goes, "Well, there was only one E and one N in the stencil package." So you can never be quite clear enough in your instructions, and probably it would be very, very good idea to have them somehow communicate back their understanding of the assignment just to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, if you're still an employee as well and doing this business on the side, it's great practice, even if your boss doesn't require it, to do that.
And actually, it's a great idea for us to do it too. I mean,
Yeah,
to the degree we have a boss. I mean, if you're
yeah,
working in a partnership with your wife, you definitely have a boss. So
yes,
it just helps to make sure that the communication was crystal clear between multiple parties.
absolutely. And then if they get mad at you for not doing it right later, you can, especially if it's your wife, you can come back and like, "This is what you said. I wrote it back. You confirmed it." So cool. Well, what else do we got here with regards to properly delegating?
Well,
We want to also do regular check-ins
I
so
think
that,
that's really, yeah.
especially if it's a longer project, a larger task, because the longer you go, if it's like aiming at a target. If you're a little bit off here, by the time it gets to the target, it's way off. So you want to do regular check-ins so that if it's a longer project, if you're checking in every day and they're off a little bit, you fix it quickly. Whereas if it's a month-long project or a 2-week-long project, then and it's going off a little bit every day, then it's going to be way off for delivery. So
Yeah, let's just talk about this for a second with respect to VAs and specifically Filipino VAs, because there are cultural differences between all nations of the world, and there's certainly cultural differences between the Filipinos and ourselves. And as good as they are in so many ways, one thing that I've found is when we look in the mirror, we see ourselves, we see our own reflection, and we're probably not overly impressed with ourselves because we know the good, the bad, and the ugly. But to the Filipino VA, we're the boss. We are the authority figure. We're the scary people, and they're very, very kind people, and they want to do good work. But I found that oftentimes they're afraid of making a mistake, and they're afraid of admitting they don't know how to do something because then they think that maybe we won't have faith in them anymore. And so, what may happen, or what could happen, especially if you make the mistake of assigning something that's not a good fit with their skill set, is they'll take the job and they'll say, "Aye, aye, sir," but they'll kind of freeze in the background, and they won't necessarily tell you that they're stuck because they don't want to let you think that they can't do it. So having these regular check-ins is good for all parties. It's good for you because you know that the project is advancing. It's good for them because they're now responding to your requirement to do that, and so you can jump in there and help them at critical points to help them succeed, because they may not be willing to come to you on their own and say they don't know what they're doing.
yeah, I think that's a really good, great point. I would just like to add to that a little bit. The cultural differences. it's and I don't want to sound stereotypical because every individual is a little bit different, but on the whole, particularly dealing with Filipino VAs, you have what I've heard phrased the island mentality sometimes. Um, but yeah, they can be, very shy and not, embarrassed to admit they don't know how to do something. And so you've got to develop a relationship with those people and really make an effort to befriend them a little more than just I'm the boss and because I said so. Um, got to give them a comfort level that they can come to you and say, "Hey, I'm kind of stuck. I don't know how to do this." Uh, I don't know. Have you ever been ghosted from a Filipino VA, Howard?
Can't say I have.
I have, and it's been twice when I was first starting out.
Sounds like a
Um,
personal problem.
well, it could have been, it could have been. I may have been too direct. I may have been rude. I don't even remember. It's been so long. Um, but so that also points back to a good reason to have SOPs so you can quickly train another one. However, um, yes, there's a mentality that if they really don't know how to do something or they're feeling like you're going to be really disappointed, rather than face that disappointment, they just disappear. And I know I've talked to people who've had that issue. And I think things have gotten a lot better over the years. You've got a lot more sophisticated VA agencies and whatnot. However, that is an issue. So you really, I mean, and I think the other thing is you can get some of these people to do far more than you think you can. Um, but you've got to really help develop a confidence with them.
Hmm.
All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So
Which kind of gets to the next thing I was going to talk about, which was you have to, I think it's really important as we work with our subordinates that we have the right mindset. I think I've worked for people whose mindset has been, you work for me. My job is to extract as much from you as I possibly can and give you as little in return as possible. And I'm going to beat the crap out of you to do that. I'm not sure that's the best, most productive way to work with people. I think if you have the right mindset, and your mindset is that my goal is to do whatever I can to help you be as successful as you can be. And I'm going to develop you and I'm going to mentor you and I'm going to do all these things to help you evolve, not only in this business, but in your career. I think that creates a loyalty. It certainly contributes towards helping them to care as much as you do, because I find that most people are good, and there is this concept of reciprocity. When people do right by you, you want to do right by them. So, we certainly want to have that kind of a mindset where we want to help our people become as successful as they can be. We've kind of touched the issue of communication, but communication needs to be often, especially if there's a problem, it needs to be free. They need to feel confident and secure that they can come and bring a problem to you and not have you blow up in their face. We should be generous in our praise, but also I think we need to ensure that when we do need to criticize, and sometimes we do need to criticize, but we do it in a constructive way. Let me show you how we motivated people in the Marine Corps. I'm going to turn around so you can see the back of my shirt. Can you see it?
the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yes, that is the way you motivate employees. You beat them. No, that's not true. But clearly we believe that in the Marine Corps because it's on a shirt. So we had this term that in the Marine Corps, and I'm not sure it was a term when we used it, but when I was in my last duty station at Headquarters Marine Corps, we had a new commandant, and General Krulak. and he's actually the guy that promoted me to captain, which was kind of cool. And he was on a mission to eliminate what he called the zero defect mentality. And the zero defect mentality is that we must be perfect all the time. And that translated into a lot of different things that were ridiculous. So, for example, there was a joke that the way to be successful in the Marine Corps is to get to work 10 minutes before your boss, leave 10 minutes after your boss, PT every day, that's physical training every day, and generate one piece of paper. And then you could be successful in your career. But think about that. If the colonel gets in at 7:30, that means that the major has to be in at 7:20, which means the captain has to be in at 7:10, which means the lieutenant has to be in at 7 o'clock, which means the enlisted guys have to be in at 6:30 for sure. It doesn't make any sense, but there was a certain behavior and a certain culture about that. And General Krulak thought it was stupid, and it resulted in a lack of morale and poorer performance. So he said, look, we don't need a zero defect mentality. The problem with a zero defect mentality is that if there's anything less than perfection, it's a failure, which kills morale. And it also prevents anybody from ever taking chances. No one's going to take a chance because chance is risk. And if it doesn't pan out, then you're going to get in trouble. So as we build the cultures in our organization, strongly recommend that we also do not build the zero defect mentality. People make mistakes. People are growing. We're all human. If you have the right person with the right skill in the right chair, and you're motivating them and and showing them that you care about them, and chances are they're going to reciprocate. If they don't, get rid of them. They're the wrong person.
I mean, for sure. And the most important principle there, though, is you got to own it. You're the business owner. You got to own it. And so the first thing when there's a mistake or underperformance is you have to assume. Just start out by pointing three fingers back at yourself and start out thinking, okay, what could I have done better in my instructions? And evaluate all that before you jump down somebody's throat. Well, shouldn't be jumping down anybody's throat, but before you start, blaming and create a teaching environment. Always try to figure out, well, okay, I see where you might have gone off there. I should have tightened up my instructions a little bit better. Always try to give grace where you can. That gives your subordinates the more of a feeling that you're human and you understand, and that's going to create an open door for them to come to you when they don't understand or they think they've got something wrong. Now, of course, that goes so far in your evaluating. If it's something that keeps repeating and you've improved your instructions and whatnot. The reason I bring this up is because I think also a lot of new people who are new to delegating and particularly working with VAs, Filipino VAs, sometimes I think they have the perspective that, oh, well, gosh, I'm hiring a VA at a company like Landmasters. They're land experts. They just know how to do everything already. Well, it's not true, and it doesn't. And so if they deliver you something that is not what you expected, not what you required, I've also seen new people just throw up their hands and say, this doesn't work. These Filipinos can't do it. I'll have to do it myself. And it's that perfection mentality also, that nobody can do it as good as I can do it. And so you just have to work harder at getting better at utilizing those resources. And once you do that, you have good instructions, you're able to manage them well. You just, you got to go through the bumps and evaluate them. One time, one mistake, you've got to evaluate how well you're doing to present that material to them. So why do employees fail to meet our objectives? So, maybe they don't care. Those are the people that we, if they've got a bad attitude and we can't fix it, then we just fire them. And I like to grade employees on A player, B player, C player. The C players, if you establish they're a C player, get rid of them. But B players, we work hard to make them into A players, and the A players we want to make sure we take care of. So they may not care, they may not have the right knowledge or skills, but they've got, so they're that B player. So we want to coach them. We want to once you get to a point where you've determined this person is good, they've got attitude, good attitude, they've got a core foundation of skill sets. I can mold this person. That's the B player you want to really pour your heart and soul into and teach them. And then, also recognizing where to utilize people with certain skill sets. You may have somebody who's great, let's say at maybe writing ad copy or posting ads and things like that, but they're not the right person who maybe is going to do due diligence or make calls to the county for you, things like that. So then, hire somebody else to do that with the right skill set. So you can't always put the square peg in the round hole, where this person's really good at this, but they may not have the mindset or the core skill set for these other responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that's right. A couple things. One is when we talk about expectations, there's one expectation that I always try to make right at the beginning. It's, I always tell people, look, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and mistakes are okay. We don't have a zero defect mentality here. However, what's not okay is making the same mistake twice.
Right.
So we make a mistake, we talk about it, we understand it, we figure out how to correct it. Never want to see that mistake again.
Yeah.
Right? If I do, that leads me to believe that there's something else going on here. There's a problem here that we have to deal with, and you don't want to be a problem.
Right. Or the beatings will continue.
Or the beatings will definitely continue. But I think your evaluation with your ABC model is good. I think that if somebody doesn't have the right attitude and doesn't care, with a blink of an eye, it's see you later. But if somebody does care and they just can't seem to perform in the task that you're giving them, I think we as leaders really have to think hard, to work hard to understand what is their skill set. And because if we're giving them something that's not consistent with their skill set, we are not setting them up for success. And that is not their fault. That is our fault. And so, which leads to the next question is, do I actually have work for their skill set? If I don't, then I'm sorry, I don't have any work for you. But if I do have work for that skill set, then I should give them a job that's consistent with what they're good at, what their interests are, so that they can be successful. And that's part of the hiring correctly and at the beginning. And it can be challenging because, especially with VAs, when you start out, can you do it? Oh yeah, of course I can do it. Everybody can do everything. And then you get into it and realize that's not really the case.
Right.
Everything looks good in the sales process.
Yep. And that points to, I know we're running out of time, but I'll just leave this at a high level. That points to clearly defining the objectives and the task that you need. You get to a point where okay, I need to hire somebody. Well, you need to be very clear and list out those tasks or those projects that this person's going to be working on, and then give them a test project, and not something that's just random to test them. Actually make that project, working on a property or working on a project that you actually have to get done. That way, if they do it right, then through that test process, you've had productivity. And if they do it wrong, well, then you just scrap it and find the next person anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
exactly.
All right. Well, I think we beat that horse dead.
No, that was good. That's a great topic. And hopefully we have provided some information or a couple tidbits here and there that will be useful to people. If you can do this, if you can hire right, get the right people in the right places, get them to be doing the work, create leverage for yourself, because you are, I call it the tick. a tick the head can live without the body, but the body can't live without the head. So, so you are the tick, and you need to be putting your head into the most important work and the most valuable work, and that means delegation. So, hope that worked for you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on the Land.MBA podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, had a bit of fun, and walked away with some actionable insights that you can apply to your business. Dave and I have got some great content and interviews planned, so don't forget to rate and review, and of course subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If we mention any interesting links or tools, you'll find them in the show notes. To learn more about Land.MBA, visit our website at, wait for it, Land.MBA. See you next time on the Land.MBA podcast.